the life of a pastor from the inside, like it was very lonely. Like I don't remember my dad having friends. Like I think I was probably 21 before I heard my dad say, "Oh, this is my friend." Like I'd never heard that. And so I didn't really see pastors having friends and seem having good connections. And I also saw some like really painful examples of like pastors being lightning rods for people. And this is, I've come to see like this is actually part of what it means to be a pastor as well. Is like people sometimes they take out their frustration with God on you as a pastor sometimes. And man, that really sucked. Hey, my name is Joshua Gordon, and I am editor at the LeadPastor.com. I am also a lay pastor. I'm a dad. Got so many children. Well, it feels like a lot for me. I'm an author, and I just love Jesus a whole lot. And this is my Faithfully story.
Welcome to Faithfully Stories, the podcast that brings you inspiring tales from conversations with church leaders as they navigate the peaks and valleys of their faith journeys through their ministry work and everyday life. Join us as we delve into their challenges, moments of encouragement, and answered prayers. The Faithfully Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. Learn more at faithly.co. Get ready to be uplifted and inspired as we unveil the heart of faith through stories from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly Stories podcast.
Tell me how your faith journey started.
Okay, so I grew up in the church. So my grandfather founded a church, and then my dad married my mom. And then he became the lead pastor, and I'm the oldest son of in our family, and so you can kind of imagine the types of things I heard my whole life. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a pastor someday. And when I was younger, I thought that was awesome. And then I actually went to Bible college, and I don't know exactly why, but I burned out pretty hard. I got really frustrated with the kind of training I was getting. And I mean, everyone's story's got tons of twists and turns, but eventually I kind of hit a spot where I kind of swore to myself, like, I will never work for a church. I'm done. Like, I never walked away from Jesus. I always loved Jesus. But in terms of like what, practically speaking, the body of Christ is going to look like on earth, I'm like, I don't think we're doing church right. And, reflecting back on that, I think that there's a ton of personal damage that I'd taken that I didn't really recognize at all. And so I would say that I experienced a lot of collateral damage at the hands of church. So going through college and then interning at a bunch of different churches, I had a lot of wounds, and Jesus took really good care of me and really good care of my heart, over the span of probably 4 or 5 years. He brought some like really special people into my life. I got some counseling and processed a lot of the difficult stuff that I'd experienced, and kind of began to see and realize that my calling to be a pastor was something I didn't have to work hard towards in a way. There's a moment where I feel like Jesus really kind of whispered into my heart, and he's like, Josh, you're going to be a pastor someday, but don't worry about it, because when the time comes, you'll want it. And that was like so freeing to me. Like, oh, okay, when it comes along, I'll want it. I'm like, great. It like took so much pressure off of me. And so I would say that, I've been a believer my whole life. But I think my faith really began to sink kind of deep into the bedrock of who I am, probably in my mid-20s, give or take. And that's kind of when I would say I began to see, like, all right, my relationship with Jesus, the intimacy that I experienced with him on a daily basis, really kind of began to show fruit, I guess. Because I know that, God, I love in Psalm 23, it says, goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our life. I just imagine that, God's got two big, I love Irish wolfhounds. And so just two big wolfhounds, one's called goodness and one's called mercy, and kind of been chasing me my whole life. And so, yeah, that's what I began to experience that a lot more in my mid-20s. And so now I'm 39 today. And so I was part of a church planting team 5 years ago and worked on planning a church, and then I joined their pastoral staff. I'm a lay pastor about 3 years ago, and I started working at the LeadPastorcom, which is a website specifically devoted to helping pastors and church leaders to streamline and make their day-to-day ministry more efficient so they can spend more money and more energy and more of their time doing the things that pastors get into the ministry to do. And yeah, so I've been there, started early this year. And so it's been really, really cool just to see how God's had his hand in my life the whole time, opening doors, closing doors. And so, yeah, it's been quite a journey. It's quite a journey.
Yeah, I would say like, I love Jesus, but his bride's a little messy.
100%. There's a moment in my counseling experience where I was talking with the counselor, we were talking about like parenting and stuff. And I was like, I just struggled so much with the thought that, in the same way that I got a lot of damage, I think all of us do, like in our family of origin. And I was like, I just don't want to cause pain for my kids. And the counselor was like, Josh, like, think like, who's the best parent in the whole universe? I was like, well, God is. And he's like, how are his kids doing? And I was like, that's a great point. Like I don't have to be the perfect dad. Like I could be the perfect dad and my kids still can be screwed up and messed up. And so I have a great mentor of mine is a guy named Frank Friedman. He was a pastor for a bunch of years in Louisiana. And I remember he said to me one time, he was like, I love the church. I love the church enough, like that I'll fight for the church. Even that means sometimes I have to fight the church. And I've kind of seen that even in my time as a lay pastor too. There's times when loving someone requires being willing to step into conflict with them. And that's not really an easy thing to do ever, especially for me. Like I thrive on positive reinforcement. I love it when people like me. And so being willing to step into a place where someone might feel criticized, like, oh, I just hate it. But sometimes that's what, love requires that sometimes. So it can be tough.
Yeah, the strongest families fight. And that's why forgiveness and reconciliation is such a amazing principle, right?
Yeah, I think so. For sure.
So where was all this? Where did your grandfather settle and your parents meet?
Yeah. So, my grandfather was born in the Netherlands and then he emigrated when he was 19. And so he planted a church, right around, little town. Well, at the time it was a little town called Guelph, Ontario, in Canada. And so it's about an hour and a half, from Toronto. And, my dad grew up in that same area, and then my mom, so my grandfather's daughter. So they met, I think my dad was like 14 or 15. And so my grandfather actually led my dad to Jesus and then was a big part of his faith journey as well. And so that's where my mom and dad met. And that was a church that I grew up in. And then when I was 19, I wanted an away from home experience real bad. And so I felt like a kind of a call to ministry. And so I made a list of all the Bible. This is a terrible way to make decisions, by the way, but like I made a list of all the Bible colleges in Canada and like picked the most interesting names. And then it was like, okay, which ones are out of province? And so I narrowed it down to Rocky Mountain College in Calgary. And then I think there's like Bethany Bible College, I think is if I remember correctly, it's a long time ago now, but that, on the East Coast. And so I ended up flying out to, Calgary, Alberta, and to check the school out, and there's some super cute girls there, and so that made my decision for me. And again, it's like not like the holiest or most spiritual way of making decisions, but at the same time, like God worked in my life, He worked in my heart. It was a great school that I really enjoyed my time at Rocky, and ironically, I did meet my wife there. And so my parents were delighted when they found out she's actually from Ontario, where I'm from as well. And so, so it was pretty awesome. So
yeah, isn't it funny that God uses all of our foolish decisions? Like we're like so sure about like, oh, this is the way, and then but absolutely. Then, like you said, if you never went there, you would have never met your wife. So there's all these contingencies that like kind of magically work out,
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of the things for me too. That's like one of those factors in my life that has brought me a ton of peace is knowing that, like, even if I'm afraid of making the wrong choice, like God will still use it and He still can use it. Right. And so that's one of those things where, like, I think there's so much more safety in our relationship with Jesus than most of us give it credit for, in the sense that, like, God knows us and he loves us and he accepts us. It's like so much. Like he's not surprised by anything that anything we do. He's not surprised by it. And I think that he's totally happy, very happy to work with the foibles of how Josh Gordon's brain works or how Danny's brain works or whatever, even those silly little things. Like, so I think that Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Like, that's like a great safety net for my life. Like every once in a while, I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with this, about this decision. And I'm like, well, if I just sort of kind of take the pressure off myself and know that God will use anything to, for my good, for my benefit, that just takes pressure off and makes my life a little simpler, if that makes sense. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's not like a defined sin, and some people take it too far with the logical conclusion of that's why it's a sin. No, it's like in the Bible, there's clear things of like the intent of the heart.
Yes.
But if you're just like, out of all the good and gray options, just pick one, because those actions lead to more action, and
100%.
That's just kind of like how life works. It's like like a Venn diagram of events.
Life is just a Venn diagram, man. Like we were saying, like 100%.
So, what were some of the struggles that you're feeling in Bible college? Because for me, like when I was in undergrad, I like joined like a Christian club and whatnot, and then that first year I was like, man, these are just hypocrites. And like looking back, like we're all 18 and 19, so like who knows anything, right? But like as a freshman, like a senior, was like, 4-year difference. But that's why like the following year I was like, okay, I'm gonna abandon the Christian club and just party with my roommates, and that was a lot of fun. But I realized, they're all the same. One's just saying they're, trusting Jesus, and the one's not. But, for you, what was the struggle in Bible college?
That's a great question. I've thought about this a bit. I think if I'm really honest with myself, I think part of it was sort of like what you were kind of alluding to, that sort of a sense of, I'm like, 19 or 20. And so I don't know, like 19 or 20-year-olds just have this perfectly clear understanding of how the world works. And so like I had that for sure. And so seeing such a disparity between what I thought should happen and then just the realities of what was actually out there, like it just kind of grated on me too. I think that something else that I really wrestled with as well was, I think I didn't quite understand. I think there's probably two things. I don't think I quite had a clear understanding of what it meant to be a pastor. And because all the examples of pastors that I'd had, so my dad was a pastor for, from my 14 or 15, he became the lead pastor of the church I was at. And then my grandfather was pastor for my whole life before that. And I just saw it, seeing the life of a pastor from the inside, like it was very lonely. Like I don't remember my dad having friends. Like, I think I was probably 21 before I heard my dad say, "Oh, this is my friend." Like, I'd never heard that. And so I didn't really see pastors having friends and seem having good connections. And I also saw some like really painful examples of like pastors being lightning rods for people. And I've come to see like this is actually part of what it means to be a pastor as well. Is like people sometimes they take out their frustration with God on you as a pastor sometimes. And man, that really sucks, especially when, like seeing my dad, like, I don't want to go into too many specifics, but seeing some of the stuff that my dad's had to experience. And actually, when I was in my Bible college years, my mom and dad both went through like an incredibly difficult time because of like a deep betrayal that happened. And a large part of it was because just they were just the leaders of the church. And so watching that, like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to experience that at all. And I don't think at the time I realized how big of an impact that had on me in the moment. But yeah, I experienced a real frustration. Also through some of the church, like there were two churches specifically that I interned at. And in both of those, I can see now I really experienced mismanagement. That's what it was. And just in terms of like just a lack of understanding of what I needed, like as an intern, I felt like I kind of been given a task and kind of put in the corner, and I didn't feel like I had support. And, some of that's probably due to my own, lack of ability to communicate my needs, my own lack of understanding of my needs and that type of thing. But I think that I was kind of immersed into I think mismanagement keeps coming back to my mind. It's like, I think I was mismanaged. And so that's really formed my heart now, in the sense that I think God's used that, and he's redeemed that to help me to see the importance and the value of each person, at New Life Fellowship. That's a church that I'm pastoring at. And each individual they have a special sacred, value and worth, and I was just actually chatting with my dad earlier today, and just reminded of this great truth, like God's most precious resource, his most sacred resource is people. It's not money, it's not time, all those things, that as pastors, you always feel like you don't have enough of. Like, no, it's people. That's God's most sacred resource. And so I think that lesson was really burned into me, in college. And so I would say, like, probably the other thing is in college, I looked at the world and I saw, I think I'd read some stats at the time that said, in the next 20 or 30 years, like 70 to 80% of people in the world will live in an urban center, a major urban center. And I looked at the training I was receiving, and I felt like I was just being trained to be a pastor at some tiny little rural church. And that didn't seem cool to me. That didn't seem flashy enough, wasn't sexy enough. And so I think there's some discord there as well. And, now looking back, I feel a little bit ashamed, or not ashamed. I feel like I'm okay. I just see my lack of understanding in that kind of perspective, and realizing there's a real special honor that comes with, walking with somebody over the long term, for 10, 15 years, and seeing someone, helping them, with their understanding of who Jesus is, and helping them to, just kind of walking them with them along that journey. There's a real special honor to that is way more important than, as fun as church metrics are, and as great as to see our numbers are growing and, their money's like, all that's really wonderful. But the point is, like, as pastors, our number one job is making disciples, right? And so there's a whole bunch of other stuff that comes along with that, but I think I didn't quite understand that in my Bible college years, which led to a lot of the, as I'm saying this, Mike, I'm realizing, my burnout was probably my own fault.
It always is, brother.
Oh, man. Oh.
There's something about the mind and how we construct, like, a version of reality based on our perception. And a lot of that is just expectations. And, deconstruction is like a dirty word sometimes in the church, but actually, I don't think people are deconstructing their faith. I think they're deconstructing the expectations they had about their faith. And so, like, that's the beauty of God, is like, all the little stuff that you think, the life you want, it's like, poof. And then he gives you the life. And that's why what I've learned this year, actually, after 41 years, so I'm a late bloomer too, is a
couple of late bloomers. Love it.
Be faithful where you are to the day, and God moves us, So, like, I lived in Atlanta, I was in Philly, and, like, when I was in college, I went to Binghamton. But I realized, like he will make my life situations great or terrible, so that I'll have to leave and go somewhere else. But wherever I am, as long as I'm around his people and witnessing, like, why I do what I do according to, like, who he is and his word, then that's enough. And I leave the rest to him. So my life has been simplified in that way,
Oh yeah, 100%. It gets, and I think that's one of the things that the world around us doesn't get, like, and that's like a huge disconnect, I think, where, there's this cool factor to being busy, or to having, like, I've got all these different things going on, and, like, I've had, like, biohacking and, like, all this, and, like, some of it's, like, is legitimately kind of interesting stuff and kind of cool stuff. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think that we as humans were designed to thrive well in that kind of a scenario, in that kind of a situation. Now, the reality is we're kind of plunked into that culture. And, like, I wish I could change culture, but I can't. I have control over my own mind and my own thoughts. I definitely don't have control of my own. I'm a big feeler. My feelings are big. So being able to, like, sort through my own emotions and, like, okay, what's going on here? And, like, but it always comes back to simplicity, right? I was thinking about, God took the prophet Elijah or Elisha. I always get the two mixed up, but, and saying, I'm going to show you myself, right? And it wasn't in the huge, impressive fire that blew through. It wasn't through like the massive, all-encompassing storm. Like it was like the still, small voice. And that's what I'm realizing is like God speaks in a still, small voice. I wish it was, like, I don't know if you grew up watching the Hanna-Barbera movies, right? And it's like every time somebody prayed and God spoke, there's always a beam of light that came down. And I was like, I need a beam of light. Come on. Like, but like, that's not how it happens, right? Like it's just in the still small voice. And that's one thing I'm realizing too, as a fellow late bloomer, is that God's leading. Sometimes I think it's just me, because like God speaks in my mind through our minds. Right. And so, and he speaks through a lot of different ways, but I think that a lot of times he leads through my own like desires. And I caveat that in the sense, like what you're saying, there's like obviously like if we've been made one with Christ, like I think it's in Romans says what we have, and like, our hearts have been made new, then we can trust our own hearts. And, but being able to sense God's leading, like that's a skill. It takes time. It takes practice to risk getting it wrong, and that's again with that Romans 8:28, such a wonderful safety net, right? The other thing is too, is God, where God leads, there's peace. And so for me, following God's peace, in my life, and again, it's there's simple things, right? And I think that our lives can be simple and not easy. Simple and easy are not the same thing. I wish they were, but they're not. And so I think that's the kind of the life that God wants for me, is one where I'm able to relax in him, regardless of the circumstances. I'm able to, experience peace and joy and, the fruits of the Spirit, regardless of the types of circumstances I find myself in. And that's, if you really think about that, like, how many people do you know who you could say, oh yeah, well, that's a really peaceful person or a really joyful person? But that's what a life, that's the results of a life lived trusting Jesus and risking with Jesus, Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah, perfectly. Like one thing from the previous things you said is I no longer say like, be perfect. Like I'm not perfect. And people say, I'm not perfect. I'm not Jesus. But like my counter argument is that you have the Spirit, you have the same Spirit. So you are, right? 100%. But I don't think the Christian life is about being perfect. Like, I think it's accepting the fact that we're special, right? Because people are not perfect. He's perfecting us, but we are special. Yeah. And throughout all the mess, it's this life of constantly like getting hurt. Yeah. Because when you love something, it's you're signing up for getting your heart destroyed, right? And saying like, okay, it's okay. I'm going to get through this. But it's also realizing without the mistakes, and like startup life teaches you this like real fast. Like you have to make so many little mistakes, not big mistakes, little mistakes, and it'll teach you and guide you. And I think that's what I've been learning, that like God really only cares about faith. Like he's teaching us how to trust him and trust ourselves in the way we try to obey, right? Yeah. So even if we obey imperfectly, it's like, okay, let me go back to the word. Because one thing that's simplified my life is understanding everything in scripture and language. There are patterns that God is teaching us, the pattern of his character, the pattern of our relationship to him. And so when we see that reflected in the world and with each other, that's when I'm like, my emotions aren't conforming, or like it feels wrong, but he's telling me to do it. So one example is like I've shared on this podcast, like living with my mom has been the best and worst thing in my life. Like she was an amazing mom, right? Yeah. And I got older and she keeps treating me like I'm 12, and like that doesn't work for me anymore. But he worked out a lot of anger issues that were triggered because in my mind, if you cross my personal boundary, I have the reason or justification to lash out and be angry at you. Yeah. And God's like, no, the only boundary you have is your body. Right? Yeah. So as long as they don't touch me, whatever they say or do, like change all my stuff, that's fine. I'm like, okay, Lord. And especially because she's my mom, so I can't. Like you talked about, feeling ashamed. Like I feel ashamed about that, and I got over that shame. Like, thank you for the cross. Yeah. But, a lot of it, I think it really is like understanding. Okay, everything in my life, I kind of have to be selfish in that way. Like, it's about me to learn how to trust the Lord with my thoughts and my emotions and do what he says, because some way, somehow, doing it the way he wrote out right? Living full abundant life. Because I think that's another thing we don't talk about in the church is that like Jesus talks about being fully alive, right? And in the beginning, like of my Christian walk, like you think Jesus is crazy because you're like, give up everything. It's like, what? Seek ye first the kingdom. Like, what?
Yeah.
And I realized once you understand everything Jesus is talking about and how everything is just relational and like all the success and all the wealth and all the kingdom is built by people.
Yeah.
And people love you and trust you. They'll do anything you want. In an evil way, it can be manipulative, but in a loving way, it's like, oh, let's do this together kind of unity. Yeah. It makes so much sense of like, oh, okay. Like everything I want to accomplish, it involves people. And, you know, with people, it takes trust and yada, yada, yada. So, yeah,
I think you're really onto something there. And I mean, I think it goes back to something you said so well, which is like the Christian life isn't about perfection, right? It's about trust. And it's interesting because if you look at the Old Testament, like the old agreement, the old covenant that God made with humanity is like, hey, here are the conditions in which you and I can be okay with each other. And it was all about obedience, like first and foremost, performance, your behavior, and then you have the system of sacrifice, which kind of covers up your screw ups, right? And then what the awesome thing about Jesus, he's like, no, I'm going to take care of that. So that way, you know, when you are in Christ, you've accepted the gift of salvation. Like not only are you like freed from sin, past and future sin, but you also are made new, right? And so that means that the connection between me and Jesus is like solidified. And so that means that I no longer have to judge my behavior by, did I hit this standard of perfection or performance or behavior? It's like, no, like the conditions of success now are, did I trust Jesus? And the interesting thing with that is like, trust is just so dependent on relationship. Like it's interesting, like, you know, you and I, we've known each other now for like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, give or take, right? And so trusting you is like, okay, he says he's going to email me, so is he going to email me, right? Whereas like the type of conversations I have with my wife, who I've known for like 20-ish years, like what trust looks like for Josh and Sarah Gordon is actually, it looks way different. And like what trust looks like is going to be different for each individual person. And so the relationship of trust that I have with Jesus and that you have with Jesus is going to look a little bit different for each person. And so one of the things I believe and I've come to observe in myself is that I think that as humans, all of us we kind of like a similar operating system, similar drives that kind of like within us, like big, I kind of think it was like, okay, big questions that we look for answers to, like, am I valuable? Right? Like, am I worthy of love? You know, and there's tons of those types of questions I think that drive us a lot. And I think that shame is often a byproduct of having that answer inside being like dependent on my behavior, not on my standing with Jesus. And so what I've seen is that, you know, if like shame is measured in terms of like the amount of shame that I experience, like the more that I'm learning what it looks like for me to trust Jesus, the more I actually am risking that trust with Jesus, like the less and less shame I'm experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Now, again, I tend to be an emotional person. And so I feel a lot of feelings. And so shame is something that I do battle with consistently. But the answer to my shame is not just, you know, like, here's an example. Maybe it's TMI. If it's TMI, we can just scrub this from the recording, right? But like,
I love TMI.
Okay, perfect. So like, I've struggled with body image issues for much of my life, right? And so, but what I can say is that over time, as like Jesus has led me through various healing experiences, and the weird thing is that very often healing experiences are on the heels or like just come after like a really painful thing where somebody says something that just like, oh boy, like it just hurts and it cuts deep for whatever reason. And I'm just like suddenly rocked with shame out of nowhere. And I mean, we all know what shame feels like. We all know the headspace it can put you in. And I'm like left like, Jesus, is this like, I don't even know what to say right now. But like, I'm just like feeling horrible. And And often like what he prompts me to do, what he invites me to do is like, okay, face the actual pain. Like, what's the actual shame I'm feeling with, like, okay, like I'm going to be rejected. My close friends are going to reject me because I'm too fat, or because, or I don't look good enough, or because whatever. Right. And like, it's one thing to say that out loud, but like, it's another thing to like actually feel like you might believe that. And then, so facing that pain and facing the source of that shame, and then allowing Jesus to come in and meet that lie with truth, like that is the thing that begins to actually knit that wound back together. And so that's the thing, like the other thing is like the word trust, like it's almost a Christian buzzword, almost like for me, the word gamble or the word risk is like sort of what trust means to me, where it's like Jesus is saying, hey, like, this is what's true about you, actually, right? Like, kind of on the body image thing, like, I will like spend a lot of time like making sure that my clothes match and that I look cool, or whatever cool means in my mind anyway. But like, but Jesus, like trusting Jesus for me means, what if people don't like what you look like? Like, are you okay with yourself then? Right? And then choosing to go out into the world, even if I don't feel like I look great. Like, it's almost like gambling on the fact that Jesus will be enough for me in the moment. And where it's like, I don't know for sure, right? It's like, is he going to be there? Is it going to be like, and like, yeah, anyway. So that's a whole, I mean, I could talk for a long time about my struggles in that area, but that's one of those things, man, where like the Christian life is so much easier, I think, than a lot of people experience. But at the same time, it's so much harder because we love to be in control of ourselves, and then to kind of bring that in submission and alignment with who Jesus says we are. Man, that can be really hard sometimes.
Yeah, it's simple but hard, right? Not easy.
100%.
Right?
Absolutely.
Did you watch Inside Out 2?
You know, I haven't yet. I haven't.
You should, because someone needs to do, or like a seminary needs to do, like an entire theology of it, because at the core, it's about the self-belief of the identity that she built up and how that gets reconstructed. Yeah. Right. And I was like, that movie convinced me I don't need to do a book. I don't need to do a podcast. I don't need to do anything. Yeah. If you're just paying attention to the climate of the human condition, and like God is saying, like, guys, hey, everything you believe about yourself is here. Yeah. And let me tell you something. Yeah. Everything we see, like I joke all the time, like we're in the Matrix, because like everything we see is man-made. Yeah. If you really think about it, we're constantly surrounded by the things like we created and we constructed to keep us safe and yada, yada, yada. Like that's what civilization is, right? But I think it like desensitizes us from like nature and like what God is doing in the universe, right? And so like whenever you see those like videos on Instagram where they zoom out to the universe and then zoom into the quantum level, you feel insignificant. And I feel like we've lost this sense of like, I need to reconstruct a reality that like who God is and what he's doing. Yeah. And then see, okay, what everyone else is doing. So long story short, I think everyone, whoever's watching this podcast, watch Inside Out 2, right? And I think it'll make so much more sense to at the core what Jesus is saying. It's a belief. Yeah. We are believing creatures and we need someone to say, this is the belief you need in reality so that you are sure of yourself and honest with yourself and comfortable with yourself.
100%. I think that what Christianity is all about is the recognition that, you know, you can build your self-concept around whatever you want. And ultimately, the only thing that won't fail you is Jesus at the end of the day, right? And you think about there, I mean, that's all through the New Testament, all through it. You know, I think about the house in the rock versus the house in the sand. You know, you might find sand that's a little more sturdy than other sand, you know, but at the end of the day, like Jesus is the only one that won't ever let you down. And that doesn't mean you won't think he might let you down. Because sometimes I think one of the hardest things for me has been admitting myself where God didn't meet my expectations of how he should act. I think that's what comes down to, the idea of like the zooming out and the zooming in and feeling insignificant. And like, it's like reminds me, like I have this, so like one of my favorite animals is the humpback whale. And it's just like, I can't really describe really why I just love the humpback whale. I just do, like, but And like on my bucket list is to swim with the whales someday. Like I really want to do that. And I think one of the reasons though is just like the enormous power that those creatures have, and just like the amount of speed that you have to move through the ocean, and then to come up out of, like, to breach, and then just slam down in the water, like those really, really power, like there's so much power that you have to have. And I think one of the things I love about it is like it dwarfs me. And I think that's what, if I was to point out, I think a weakness in the current Christian climate is that it's so much focused on what Jesus can do for me on a personal level. And it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's special. It's sacred. But the thing that we forget is like God's power and his majesty. And it's so huge. And I think that's the thing that's like part of us as humans, we need to be dwarfed. We need to be reminded of like the real scale of things, right? Like I was thinking about, I just read this really recently. Like, if you slam your thumb with your hammer, your whole world becomes your thumb, like in that moment, right? And so much of us live with so much pain. And so our whole world becomes the pain we experience. And Jesus wants to come and heal that. And it's like what you said, like life is about like finding everything I need in Christ. But then that's not even the end of it. The next step is like, so that way I can love others and I can actually partake with Jesus in the healing and loving of people around me, and becoming like, and finding a beautiful fulfillment in being a thread in the tapestry, right? It's like the reality is like God loves me. So it's all about me in a way, for the purpose of becoming all about everyone else. Right. And I think that we have to follow that progression though, because if you don't really understand deeply on a cellular level how loved you are by Jesus, and you try to skip over that and just try to make it all about loving other people, then you're operating out of a deficit. Like you're operating out of a place, it's like trying to start a car using a AA battery. It's like, no, like you've got to make sure you've got a healthy battery. It's like everything we need is I think in Peter, 1 Peter, I think it talks about we've been given everything we need for life and godliness. Like there's nothing that's missing. But we have to kind of understand how like Jesus heals us at a heart level and fills us, and like we're filled with his love. That way it can overflow to other people. We're not supposed to try and manufacture it, right? And so anyway, I feel like we could talk forever about that, but
I have a spicy take about pain now.
Okay, bring it on. Let's do this.
I think pain is contextual. I think for me, I've learned, pain and suffering sucked, but now I no longer avoid the pain. It's not like I go looking for pain either, so don't get me wrong. But
that's good.
I embrace it because I'm trying no longer to react in a negative sense, and I just let it happen. And the thing for me is that when I feel pain, or like when I feel like someone is like hurting me, like my default is to cry. I realize crying is actually the superpower, because after you cry, you get cathartic, because I can quickly come out of that crier, and then like it's like tears of joy. Of like, oh, I get to taste some of Christ's suffering. I know it's like this reverse psychology, but I realize pain needs a context.
Yeah.
And too often we put it in a negative context. Yeah. But when you put it in a really positive context of like, oh, I no longer am afraid of pain, and when it comes, it quickly reminds me of the shared pain and suffering of Christ, and it makes me closer to him. Yeah. And like, this is a joke I tell my friends, like, oh, I'm going to be in heaven, and ask him, oh, what did you do about this? And like that, or like if I got lashes, like, oh, remember when they hit you here? Like you get to talk about like your shared experience.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, it's not too bad.
No. Yeah. Honestly, there's two things that come to my mind right away. So the first one is that there's only one person that has the actual right to invite me to redeem the pain. Only one person, that's Jesus, because he has experienced the full breadth of humanity. Like for me as a pastor, I have a bit of a background in counseling as well. And so I do a good amount of like counseling work, walking with people through their pain. And I've experienced my own pain, right? But I've experienced it just like this tiny narrow slice of the whole pain horizon. I've got this understand one slice, and it might be overlapping with yours or someone else's, but it's still my own. But Jesus is the only one who truly understands like the breadth of human pain and suffering. And so he's the only one who has the right to say, will you face the pain with me? Right? He's the only one who does. So to me, that's a really powerful thing. So that's the first thing. The other kind of thing, going back to what you're saying, like, I think there's this kind of dark underbelly, like heresy thing of like Christianity, like Christians shouldn't suffer, or suffering isn't from God. And I would say that there's definitely an asterisk on that. I wouldn't want to claim myself to understand human suffering, because I don't know if any person really can. But what I do believe is that there is an honor and a nobility to suffering well. And I think what you're saying about like suffering well was like understanding, okay, what I'm going through, it's part of the human condition, and it's okay to cry. It's okay to have that pain. It's okay to live in that pain. And it's hard. It's horrible. But understand that like Jesus is with me, and there's a special experience with Christ that you can't get any other way, right? Like I think it's in Isaiah, God talks about how he's like, he hides treasures for us in the darkness. You know, he hides his treasures in the darkness. And I think like there's some things, like some realities, spiritual realities, that we can't really get any other way except through suffering well. And I would make that distinction because I think there's a ton of people that don't suffer well, and they become bitter and they become resentful and all of those things. But I think for those who suffer well, there's like a softness to them, you know, that you experience. And like the side of that is like Hebrews 11, right? Like people call it like the Hall of Faith, like the Hall of Fame or whatever. And it's wonderful to read if you stop like halfway through. Like I think it's like verse 34 or 35, somewhere in there. Stop halfway through, because it gets really bad after that, where it's like, you know, it talks about, you know, Moses and Abraham, Samson, like all these people who like by faith did this and that and the other thing. And then it keeps going on, and it talks about there were those who like wandered the earth without a home, like living in the wilderness. You know, there are some who were eaten and killed by wild animals. There's some who were sawn in half, and those who did not see the fulfillment of the promise in this life. And it says, those of whom this earth is not worthy. And I think about that, and I kind of started feeling emotional, because I think there's such a beautiful truth that our God is the one who redeems, but we also don't always have a guarantee that we're going to see that redemption in this life. But it will be made right. It might be made right when we step into eternity. But man, that's where like I feel so out of my depth sometimes, you know, like meeting with people and talking them through what they're going through, and like working to understand and praying for them. It's like, God, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine, you know, like, and like, I've been through some hard things, and my family's been through some hard things. And like, someone really, really close to me was abused as a child, like sexually abused. And my own struggles to like make sense of that. And like, is this like my God will allow that? Like, and I mean, I think one of the most uncomfortable verses in the Bible for me is in Exodus, when Moses is talking to God. You know, God shows him the burning bush, and then God says to Moses, he says like, or Moses is saying, "Oh, I'm not good at speaking. Like, don't send me. Like, I kind of stutter or whatever." And then God says to Moses, like, "Am I not the one who makes the lame, like, and the dumb?" Like, I remember reading that, and I was like, God is like taking responsibility for that, for like birth defects. And like, that's really uncomfortable to me. And I think that's kind of like ties in a little bit to the idea of like, God is so much bigger and more powerful. He sees the big picture in a way that I just can't. Right. And his plan for somebody else is different than his plan for me. And it's some of the hardest questions are like, God, how can you be okay with what's happening there? And I don't know, like the things that God's whispered to me are like, it's like, I know the pain they're experiencing. And like, it kind of goes back to like, he's the only one who actually has the right to ask someone, will you face this pain? Like he's the only one who does, because he did it. Right. And he promises to be with us and to provide all that we need. But it's deep. It's like a deep question, hard questions. And I think for me as a pastor, my life got a whole lot easier when I realized like I don't necessarily have to have the answers to those questions for people, because like I think a lot of times we as pastors or people in church ministry, we have this pressure that we have to be able to make it better for somebody. But again, coming back to what we were talking about before, like trusting in Jesus means it's into my intimacy with him. And like, these are questions that I can offer some thoughts to for somebody if they're going through it. But at the end of the day, it's like Jesus is going to speak to them in their heart in the way that they need to hear. And so it's like, how can I help other people to hear God's voice? How can I point God's voice out a little more clearly and that kind of thing? So yeah, deep stuff, man.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up is because I think there's this misunderstanding, at least in my perspective, that, being healed from trauma and pain means you're going to be pain-free. Yeah. But that's not the case, Not
always.
It might take years for you to emotionally detach. But I realize that's also a superpower when I'm able to tap into those painful memories and cry with those people who went through similar experiences,
Yeah.
Because 100%. Now we have this shared pain, you know? And so I just want everyone to know pain is actually good if used for the right purpose. And I think that's where God is wise, right?
Yeah, 100%. I love the thought of God being like a physiotherapist. Like I dislocated my shoulder like a bunch of years ago, and boy, that hurt. And then what hurt almost as much was the physiotherapy after. And it was like, for people who've gone through physio, if you had a surgery or something like that, like you don't want to move your arm the way the physiotherapist is telling you to move your arm. Like it hurts. But like we also in the recovery process, if we've had our deep heart surgery as believers, and like discipleship is sort of like spiritual physio, where it's like, okay, sometimes God's going to lead you into things that really hurt and are really painful. But like when we choose to embrace that as much as we can, like honestly embrace it, then the pain is not a waste, right? And like, I do think that that people do suffer needlessly sometimes because they're like, I know I for sure have, in a sense that like before my current job, like I had my own business for 13 years, and my clients were speakers. So COVID came and just kicked the crap out of my business, man. And so I really struggled after things started opening up again. I kind of struggled to rebuild back where I was from because my clients weren't spending like they used to. Like the world changed for me. And I really held on to my sense of identity of I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to any thought that I should maybe stop or reevaluate, I just rejected out of hand. And as a result of that, I went through probably a year and a half extra of significant financial pressure and financial stress and deep, deep personal challenges and struggles. But again, like we were saying at the top of the interview, God worked with me on that. He's like, you ran into that wall really hard a bunch of times. You didn't have to, but I'm going to use that. And so now I'm a little softer inside, and I have a bit more understanding for people and a bit more compassion, and he's provided. I feel I'm so fulfilled with my job. My employer's like a black and white zebra. They're a media company, and they're all the sites. I think they own portfolio of 17 or 18 different websites, and they're all about helping people to win at work. And so I was hired to be the editor of the LeadPastorcom, and I didn't know that existed. My job before, I did book editing and stuff like that. And obviously I have a huge heart for the church and a heart for pastoring. And there's again, the overlapping Venn diagram. God promised to provide, and he did, and he made it way better than he had to. It didn't have and that's something I go move through my day. I'm like, man, God didn't have to give me a life that's so wonderful and fulfilling as it is, but he did, and so I just live in gratefulness, and especially looking at the decisions that I've made, I'm I don't feel like I deserve any of the things that I get to enjoy today. But it's a gift from him. And so I'm just super thankful and super grateful. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a similar spot. I have zero reason to ever complain about anything. My life is spectacular.
I'm pretty creative. I can usually find reasons to complain.
No, but compared, again, all relative, compared to how my life has been, like, I'm in the best place in my life. And I know 10 years from now, I'm going to be like, that wasn't that great because it'll be better, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Because internally, I'm not saying my external circumstances are bad. I'm just saying internally, I've just, have so much peace, love, and joy. So what can you tell us a little bit about the pastor? What was it?
The LeadPastor.com.
The LeadPastor.com. Like, how'd you get connected with them? What's that about?
So the LeadPastor.com, as I said, it's part of a portfolio of websites. It's owned by Black and White Zebra, which is a media company based out of Vancouver. And so each of the different sites is kind of based around a specific career. And so it's resources like web page articles, ebooks, communities, all sorts of resources to kind of really help a person really thrive and flourish, to do work really well and to enjoy their work really well in a specific career. So LeadPastor.com was started in 2019. And I was hired in end of February of this year, 2024, to kind of take it and bring it up to the next level. So the site specific, like the vision that I have for it, my real heart for it is obviously for pastors and for church leaders. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know of any pastors that got into ministry because they love generating church finance reports, or like setting up volunteer schedules. Like, that's like the bane of, like, for a lot of the pastors I know, like, that's the bane of their existence. Like those admin managerial type things. Now, the thing is, it's so you can't really separate that from the role of being a pastor. Like, it's part of it. It just, for me at least, and for pastors like me, it can be just draining, right? And so the LeadPastor.com, the vision I have for it is to make doing that stuff as simple and straightforward as possible. So with software, information, all that stuff, so that way you've got the energy and you've got the vision and the space in your mind and in more funds, etc., to be able to put towards the reasons that we got into ministry in the first place, like discipleship and like study and then preaching and prayer, all that stuff. And so my goal is that everything on the LeadPastor.com, every article that we post and publish is going to help pastors to do that well, to advance the kingdom. And so, hard at work, like evaluating all the articles that are on the site and like, upgrading them and improving them, and working on developing the network of, pastors and contributors to the LeadPastor.com, and like making, like, identifying, seasoned veteran pastors who've been through it, and kind of saying, hey, like, give me your wisdom, like, give me your, like, help me to see how to do things better, and wanting to make sure that every article on the site is something that's going to be, interesting and, fun to read. I was gonna say I'm a fun person. I don't know if I feel like I'm fun. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But like, I kind of, have a, certain sense of humor, and like, I love writing. And so I wanted to make sure that personality kind of comes through on the site. So it's not super dry and super boring, even though honestly, like, articles about, how to structure your church financial calendar, like, that's not necessarily a super exciting content, but I want to make it as interesting and like, engaging as I possibly can, right? To make it easier for pastors to do that well. And so, so that's kind of the guts of the LeadPastor.com. And I feel honored and privileged that I get to do that. And I take it super seriously in the sense that, hey, like, there's a lot of pastors and a lot of churches that can really use help, and so the fact that I get to do that and I get to be in a position to make that happen for pastors and churches all over the US and Canada, like, to me, I'm humbled and I love it. It's a good, yeah. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Yeah. Don't worry about it. So 2 questions. What are you hoping for at Faithly?
Okay, so at Faithly, one of the things I really like about Faithly is that it is a great way to see how many other people are out there where their faith is a big part of their career. And so, I mean, I got to meet Alicia, and so she's actually contributed an article to LeadPastor.com. I hope she's able to contribute more. And one of the things that, that article talked about is how, for pastors, like, LinkedIn is something that is sort of the default, like that's the place to connect with other people on a professional level. But LinkedIn hasn't worked for me at all on that space. And so when I set up my Faithly profile in the Discover tab, I'm like, man, there's like so many other people here who love Jesus, and that's a big part of how they operate. And I didn't really realize how, this is going to sound a little dramatic, like I didn't really realize how kind of like alone I felt as a Christian professional until I saw Faithly, and I was like, I'm not the only Christian professional. And I knew that mentally, of course, right? But I felt like I kind of was, and realizing, oh man, there's tons of other people here, and they're here because they're looking for connections with people like me. And, that's one of the things I think with pastoring that is like unnecessarily difficult, is that as pastors, the expectation basically is that you're sort of like above people. And so rightly or wrongly, you end up kind of being at, people say it's lonely at the top, and it's like, it's not supposed to be that way in churches, but it kind of is. Like, and so a lot of pastors don't feel like, and I myself, like I struggle with this, like I don't feel like I can be open and vulnerable with the people in my church because suddenly my pay, they have control of my pay to an extent. And so like, oh, if I'm struggling, with an addiction, or I'm struggling with this unhealthy habit or whatever it is, like the tendency to keep that closed, right? And so it's very hard to develop a sense of having peers, right, as pastors. And so that's one of the things with Faithly I think is awesome, is wonderful. And so I think that's one thing about Faithly. I think there's a ton of opportunity there for myself to like start connecting with other people, to develop relationships, yeah.
You can create a secret group and complain about your congregants. That's what I tell pastors.
Yeah, you could do that. I don't know if I would. I think it's important to have safe places, of course, right? Like, and that's one of the things that, so the way that our church, like New Life Fellowship, is structured, it's different than a lot of other churches are, in the sense that we have 4 pastors. So maybe we're coming up on 200 people in the church. So we have one full-time pastor and then a part-time, then 2 of us are lay pastors. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for is that I do have a place in that group of 4 of us where I can go and I can complain. And I know it's not like, I know it's the flesh, right? But it's like, I just need to get stuff off my chest with people who love me, and they're committed to seeing the real Josh, and they're not afraid of me sinning, if that makes sense, right? Like, they're not afraid of that, and they're committed to me beyond that anyway. Like, when we have that safe place, like, man, like when you can speak truthfully about how you feel and what you're thinking in a safe spot like that, there's so much value there, I think. And so I think that's what a lot of pastors and a lot of churches are missing, as I'm so grateful for with New Life Fellowship, is like that, hey, like, number one, our church culture is very open, it's very transparent, and it's okay for pastors to struggle and to have a hard time with stuff. Like, I don't know how many other pastors would be comfortable talking about body image issues, but I am, and I have, right? And so, yeah, so it's like, it's one of those things, again, that's like what Faithly has to offer, I think, is something that is desperately needed in Christian church culture and community.
Even then, you still need outside counsel, because it's like, yeah, you can be best friends with your wife, but when you get into a conflict with your wife, you need someone else to talk to. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I swear, like, my perspective now is that God just sees all of us as like little toddlers that can talk. So anytime someone is like boasting, I'm like, oh, you're a 2-year-old, like, showing off.
Yeah, totally. There's a great quote by my friend Frank, I mentioned earlier in the he said, when we're willing to be toddlers, like we're really like with childlike with God, then we end up acting like adults with other people. But if we try to be adults with God and try to be all polished and come across the right way with God, then we end up being childish with other people. I was like, man, there's just some real hard-earned wisdom in there. Like, and so I think that God, yeah, it's weird. Like, I think he sees me as I am, right? And he's okay with me as I am. And he loves me enough not to leave me where I am. Like, he's constantly wooing me and inviting me deeper, but yeah, I think sometimes you're just like, oh, Josh, you're just, like, and not in a bad way, but like, just in the way you see, like, like a toddler, like a little kid, like, man, I love you. Like, and I love that you're trying really hard, but like, there's such an easy way to do it. But like, I also respect, and that's the thing too, God respects me. Like, that's wild. Like, to think about that, like, he respects me and he's not going to force anything on me. Like he'll move at the pace that I allow him to move. Right. And yeah,
there's just so much more there because it's about like parenting and like if you tell your kid everything, they're never going to learn and yada yada. Yeah, so
absolutely, man.
I'm not going to go into that. I do want to tap into what was I going to say? Oh, I completely forgot.
That's right.
One last thing is like, how can we be praying for you?
You know, it's interesting. It's an interesting experience to be working in an industry dominated by Google, in the sense that Google drops a new algorithm and everything changes. You know, like Google gives and Google can take away. And so I think for myself, like praying for me, I think that the LeadPastor.com has so much potential to really make a tangible difference in the lives of just pastors, you know, and that's my heart for it. And that's what I really want. And so my heart, like my desire is that I learn the things I need to learn. I learn to do it well, and that I can grow the site, and like every article is like good, like well done, you know? And so I feel a real sense of, oh gosh, to say a sense of destiny feels like way too grandiose. Responsibility, you know, like, and it's a sense of timeliness, like the timing of me coming on to take over the site. Like, yeah, I just feel like God could do some really wonderful things there. And I just want to hear his voice well. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Josh. This is great.
Oh, Danny, I loved it, man. Anytime. Happy to talk through this, just the small things like human suffering and trusting Jesus.
We'll make a secret group so that we can talk about it.
100%.
All right. That's it for the podcast. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the Faithly Stories podcast. We pray this episode gave you the encouragement you needed to continue on your journey. The Faithly Stories podcast is brought to you by Faithly, an online community committed to empowering church leaders, pastors, staff, and volunteers. The Faithly digital platform offers innovative and practical tools and resources to enhance connection, foster collaboration, and promote growth within the church and ministry space. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help reach more listeners like you. Stay tuned for more uplifting tales from the front lines of ministry on the Faithly podcast. Stay bold, stay faithful, and never underestimate the power of your own story.